Hey gang, Chris Angel coming at you for another episode of Marketing for the Rest of Us. That's right. Here we go. Once again, and it is episode 30, which is awesome. That is 30 straight days, or I guess it's 29 because I did a doubleheader yesterday, but 30 days of episodes. It's awesome. And the momentum just keeps coming. So, today we're getting juicy today. The topic is embarrassed, exposed, and powerful. So let me relay the situation so you can see what happened and then how it turned out. So we have a client in our marketing agency, and in that, part of what we do is we design podcast album art for people, right? So part of what we do is we create shows for our clients, and with those shows, we'll actually create a podcast out of it and a YouTube video and all this stuff. So for the podcast, each podcast gets show art, right? Like when you go to iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, you'll actually see the show listed, and that listing has like a square piece of artwork. So up until this point, like we're a year and a half old. So up until this point, I've been kind of moving along and creating the artwork with contractors. And we have a new client who we sent the podcast artwork to, and there was something about, it wasn't clicking. I was looking at the art and I'm like, I don't really like this artwork. I sent it. I probably could have predicted. They sent it back and were like, this isn't even close. And then we went back to the drawing board. We did it again, right? And I sent them the next round of album art for their show. Again, I just was like, this doesn't. If it were my show, I would have been like, I don't think that's quite it. But I sent it anyway. Quickly got another email that was like, listen, I don't know if you didn't read my notes or if you I'm not sure, but this isn't it at all. Try again. So, and get this, right? Like, I mean, just imagine like, as I'm sending this over, knowing that it's not great, I keep getting feedback that it's not great. My, embarrassment is mounting, right? I'm like, this is not the quality that I want to put out, right? This is not the experience I want the client to have. And I feel like a fool. By the way, this was this morning. This was yesterday and today that this exchange was happening, right? So as I'm doing this, I sent one more, this is 3, I sent it a third time and then got the same response. And so I was left with this feeling of being completely exposed. Like, am I an idiot? Like, why would I send that? Why would I do that? When I knew in my gut it didn't fit. And here's why, because I didn't feel like I had access to the type of design team that I needed to pull this off for the client, right? So I was working with what I had in my team. I was trying, and I think part of my nature is I move fast. So part of my nature is like, hey, let me just send it to you. You tell me if you like it or not. And we'll just figure it out as we go. Which also, in one hand, really works for me to create, because I can create things quickly and fast. But on the other hand, doesn't work because when you start to think about the client experience and now how this client must be feeling about the investment and like, are these guys even reading the things I took time to fill out? So look, I'm being super transparent with you, right? I'm being very vulnerable with you a year and a half into my business to share, like, look, we don't always get it right. And even despite our intuition, that would say like, hey, that's not it, don't send that. We send it anyway, or we do something anyway, right? And then when your biggest fears come true, right? Like somebody goes, hey, yeah, that's not good. Well, I don't like that at all. And then you're like, oh, I knew I was right. And then what happens is I just felt really exposed. I was like, dude, I'm embarrassed. Feel really exposed. Now, here's how I would normally handle being embarrassed and exposed. I distract myself. I go take on other projects. I'll make a story about it. Like, they're not my people, or they don't get it. Like, there's a lot of deflection I'll do in the middle of feeling embarrassed and exposed. That might be one of the worst feelings for me. Is that feeling. Other people may have their own feelings. For me, being embarrassed and exposed is one of the worst for me. So normally I would get distracted and deflect and all that, but I was sitting there, I was fidgeting, right? I could feel it. I was just moving around, weird feeling in my gut. And then instead of distracting myself, I just sat with it. I just sat with like, okay, this is what is true. Like, these are the facts. And I took responsibility. I sent 3 rounds of podcast art that I felt wasn't up to par. I did that. And then it was interesting because in the middle of that, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to have that happen again. And for some reason, being honest about that experience instead of being distracted about it left me in this position of choosing to fix it. Right? That I could choose something different. That if what I felt like on my design team, it wasn't strong enough, then what I could do is go find somebody who is a strong designer for my team, right? Simple enough fix. And as I had that thought, what popped up for me were my limiting beliefs, right? Like, really good designers are expensive. Fine. And I just started to be able to see what normally you can't see. I was able to like, oh, look at that. Like, these are the limiting beliefs I have. What was cool about it for me was I started to find this place of power that where in the past I would have felt small, right? Because the feeling of embarrassed and exposed makes you feel small, right? But in this space of being exposed and embarrassed, looking at the facts of the situation and seeing that I could actually affect change with it and choose something different. And by the way, today I chose something different. I found a better design option. I started to feel liberated a little bit, right? Like, normally I feel like I have to do everything myself. And I realized like when I just start to surround myself with better and better talent or people who are good at what they do, it allows me to operate inside of my strengths and my gifts. And I started to feel big, not small. Yeah. I started to feel powerful. In the middle of this event, this what do you want to call it? Like this, this episode. So here's the lesson in it, right? The lesson is, this is such like, whenever you have those moments that you feel embarrassed and exposed, like there is a gift in it. There is a gift in feeling embarrassed and exposed that if you don't look for it, you'll distract yourself from it. But if you sit with it for a minute and get honest about the facts and look at it, what happens is you'll actually find the gift of your own power. Like you'll actually be like, it doesn't have to be this way. I could actually rise above this and make a different choice. And as you do that, and as you rise to make a better choice, a bigger choice, you'll actually be then confronted with your limiting beliefs of why you hadn't made that choice before. And once again, you're left with another opportunity to make a choice. And in that moment, you get to know yourself, if you don't shrink, right? You get to know yourself as somebody who is a match for the mountain. You're a match for the task. You're like, I will take that on. And I think, here's what I experienced, and I think this is just human, I think this is true in the human nature of it, is when you respond to the call, when you respond to what's required, when you level up your game, you are left with a knowing that that's actually who you are and who you've been trying to be. Do you know what I mean? Like when you rise, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is right. This is me. This is me. So how does all this apply to marketing? Well, look, in marketing, I don't know where you're at in the game of marketing. Most people, though, are not engaged in their marketing game enough. And when you start to engage in your marketing game, it can leave you feeling embarrassed and exposed. So you out there in the world have this opportunity to begin to put yourself out there in your marketing more often, which, guess what, means you get to have the experience of potentially being embarrassed and exposed more often. And in that, there is a gift. Every single time there is a gift. If you don't distract yourself from it, you can actually begin to look at, okay, rather than shooting from the hip with my content, I could do what I needed to do to not feel embarrassed and exposed. And you would then rise to another level in your skills and in your being, right? And you would, it's not that you would surprise yourself, but you would step into what you feel is true about yourself. And now I think sometimes, gang, we have big vision, But one of the things that stops us from actually accomplishing that vision, and it's stopped me for, I'm going to say decades. It stopped me for a long time because it's just very easy to do what is in my natural style. And then when I get confronted, to shrink and distract myself. So you can stay in that pattern for years. And I think to reach our goals, to pursue our vision, there is a requirement for you to rise, for you to level up your skills and who you know yourself to be. So in that space, and in your game of marketing, there are going to be many opportunities for you to look at the gift of your power inside of that feeling of being embarrassed and exposed. So that's it for tonight. I would love to hear your thoughts, any ahas in the comments. I will circle back and interact with you there. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit here tonight, and I will see you tomorrow for another episode of Marketing for the Rest of Us. Until then, see ya.